Hello, welcome back to Big W BBQ. Today we're going to be smoking a brisket. So let's go over what we're going to be working with here today. So I've got a little over 9-pound whole brisket here. The whole brisket contains both the point and the flat, which I'll explain here in a little bit more detail. We're going to be rubbing the outside here with yellow mustard. The only reason why we're using yellow mustard is just to give the rub something to adhere to. You won't taste it in the final product, but yeah, it works pretty well for that. And then as for the rub, we're going to be keeping it pretty simple today. We're going to be using half part black pepper as well as half part kosher salt. And then I'm going to just put a little bit of just rub after that. All the rub there is basically going to be primarily for color, as well as give it a little bit more flavor there. But for the most part, when you're dealing with a beef brisket like this, the beef flavor is strong enough that personally, I guess I don't like to mess with that flavor too much there. So then about halfway through, we're going to be wrapping it in tin foil. So let's go ahead and get this brisket unwrapped. Alrighty, so we got the meat out of the bag, went ahead and washed it up in the sink, and then patted it dry with paper towels. Before we get started here, let's talk a little bit about the cut of meat itself. So there's two main portions to a whole beef brisket. You got the flat, which is the smaller, leaner portion, as well as the point, which is quite a bit bigger here, you'll be able to notice, as well as this is where, if you've ever heard of burnt ends, this is where that part comes from. Let's start trimming this thing. So what you'll notice here is we've got the top, or the fat cap up top right now, and we're not going to do a whole lot with this. All I like to do is just kind of score it a little bit, and just make sure there's a nice little divot in there. The reason why I like to do that is it just gives the juices as well as the rub just kind of a little area there to settle in while it cooks. That's about all we're going to be doing here on the fat cap side. Typically, we're going to be looking for about 1/4 of an inch of fat remaining. So if you see any like thicker parts, feel free to go ahead and kind of trim that up a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and flip it around. One thing you may notice is that there is a pretty good chunk of fat in between the flat and the point. Sometimes this is referred to as the decal. It doesn't do a whole lot there, and it's really thick, and so it's not going to render down during the cook. So go ahead and get rid of that as much as you can. You'll notice that there is a little bit of a silver skin on top there, and it's kind of up to you on your preference there and how much time you want to spend on it. I kind of just try and just get as much as you can off there. So I noticed a couple spots here on the fat cap side that needed a little bit more trimming. So I went ahead and took care of that, and I think things are looking pretty good now. Quick tip I want to give you is that when we're cutting up the final product here, sometimes depending on how thick the bark is, it's a little bit tough to tell which way the grain is running. And when we're cutting our slices, we want to go against the grain. So typically what I like to do is just cut a little bit of a mark here on the side here that basically tells me which way I'm going to be cutting it. You don't have to cut it all the way through. Just get a good cut in there so it'll mark there for you once it's all said and done. So yeah, let's go ahead and start putting some rub on this. I'm gonna go ahead and put the rub on the fat cap side first here. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier here, I'm just going to be using primarily salt and pepper for the most part. And then I'm gonna go back here with just some of my other barbecue rub here just to give it a little bit of color. Okay, that should be pretty good for the fat cab side. And we'll go ahead and repeat the process. Since the brisket is a pretty big cut of meat, it can handle quite a bit of spices there. Alrighty, that looks pretty good. So now we're going to go ahead and let this sit here for about a half hour or so while the grill gets heated up. Just going to let it kind of rise up a little bit closer to room temp there. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how we're going to be smoking this. We're going to be having a pit temperature of around 225 to 250. I'm going to be smoking this with cherry wood. Typically on how you kind of gauge time-wise is about an hour for every pound. Since we started with a little over 9 pounds and we got probably about a half pound here of fat we removed, I'd venture to guess probably about 8.5 hours or so, but we're not going so much for the time as we are going for the temp. So we're going to be looking for around 195 to 200. You can creep up a little bit more beyond that, but we don't want to go too far past that. So yeah, that should take care of our prep work here. We're going to wait for the grill to rise in temp and we'll put her on. All right, we're back at the smoker here. We got a pit temperature about 230 degrees. That's perfect there. Went ahead and threw the brisket on. I also added a tinfoil pan below to catch some of the drippings there. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and let this sit. While we're waiting here for the meat to cook a little more before we wrap it in tinfoil, I want to talk a little bit about a very common problem that you'll probably have here with the brisket, as well as any large meat here when you're cooking it low and slow. And that is often referred to as the stall. Sometimes it could be referred to as the plateau or the zone. And basically what that means is that when the meat reaches a certain temperature, it actually stalls out, so it doesn't climb to internal temp as fast. And so I want to explain a little bit about why this happens and what to expect. I think the best way for me here to describe the stall is with a visual graph here. So essentially what's going to happen is when you start out cooking your meat here, you're going to see a pretty drastic climb in temperature in a short period of time. The exact amount of time of when you're going to hit this stall is kind of unknown. Typically it's going to happen around halfway through, and it's going to happen right around the 150 to 170 mark here. So right here is the sweet spot of where we're going to be experiencing the stall. And what happens is once you get to that temperature here, you're going to see it kind of plateau a little bit, maybe even drop a little. I have seen it before where the temperature goes down some. And then after a variable amount of time, you'll see that the temperature will actually start to climb again. And then you'll be able to finish out your cook just fine. Without going into much detail, the reason why you're experiencing a stall is due to evaporating water. All throughout the cook, the meat is constantly losing water. And essentially what happens is the water pools on top of the meat that ultimately cools down the whole meat. In regards to the duration of the stall, there are many things that come into play. The number one thing that affects the stall is going to be your pit temperature. If you're cooking at a lower temperature, you're actually going to experience a longer stall. And that is due to the momentum that builds up while you're cooking. If you have a higher temperature, you actually are able to push through that stall a little bit quicker. There are even some external factors, such as your humidity, is it windy, and even the type of smoker you're using comes into play. So you may be asking, what can I do to help prevent this stall or reduce the time? And one thing is you can wrap the meat in tinfoil, which is what we're going to be doing here shortly. This kind of helps keep the heat contained inside the tinfoil, so it ultimately keeps the meat temperature a little bit higher there. One of the things you have to be cautious about with tinfoil is that you don't want to leave the meat wrapped up for too long. If you do that, you do run the risk of hurting the final presentation of the bark. Essentially, it's steaming inside of that tinfoil, and so you're going to lose some of that crispness. An alternative to tinfoil is butcher paper, which is more porous, which results in less steaming going on inside the wrap. At the end of the day, there isn't a whole lot that can be done about the stall. If you experience it, the best thing you can do is just sit tight and ride it through. Try not to add more heat to the smoker. Don't worry, you'll get through it. Well, it's been about 3.5 hours now. I think we've hit the dreaded stall. It is stuck at 151 degrees for the past 30 minutes here, so I think I'm going to bring her inside. We're going to wrap her up in foil. We're back inside now. Got the brisket here in front of me. Everything's looking great so far. I just want to point something out here real quick here. As you can see down here on top of the flat here, there's a little bit of water pooled up there. And so I think that was definitely contributing to our stall that we were seeing here. So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up in tin foil, and we'll put her back out in the smoker. One more over top, just for good measure. Let's take her back outside. Back out here at the smoker, got the brisket on the grill, probe back in. Yeah, so we're just gonna hang tight here to 195 degrees. No need to add any more smoke since we're all wrapped up there. But, yeah, so stay tuned. Okay, so it's been about 7 hours now, and it looks like we reached our final temp of 198 here. So yeah, it went a little quicker than I thought. So nothing wrong with that though, but let's go ahead and head up to the smoker. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we're actually going to move this over here to a cooler, and we're going to leave it in the tin foil and put it in the cooler, and then we're going to wrap it up with a towel, and we're going to let it sit there for at least an hour, if not 2, just to kind of let the juices reabsorb and kind of settle down a little bit there. So let's go ahead and do that. Hey guys, just wanted to give you a quick update. So the meat has been resting in the cooler for just under an hour now. And I just wanted to let you guys know I'm not going to be able to do my usual analysis and taste testing here to end the video. I am actually going to be heading up to my parents' place here for the weekend. And so I'm bringing the brisket with me up there. And I think the drive time would give it a little bit more rest. So I apologize for not being able to give you a verbal analysis of the final product here, but don't worry, I'll take plenty of pictures, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video today. If you like what you saw, please consider subscribing. Also, if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, guys. Talk to you later.